I was born out of fire, transmuted through fire.
What do you mean by that?
I grew up in a very psychologically abusive household. Both parents were fairly traumatized. I was a pretty big hitter in the cocaine world, so big amounts was what I would tend to do. It's really crazy and strange that wherever I have problems, I always seem to be there. So I'm the common theme in my life. The weapon of the feminine is manipulation. The gift of the feminine is intuition. The weapon of the masculine is aggression. The gift of the masculine is security. Most people pray, I need more money, or I need this. I pray for the people that have hurt me. I pray for my enemies. I like challenge and I like difficulty through discipline over motivation, because that is accomplishment. Testosterone goes up in your body chemically when you achieve something. When you achieve something, you're on point and on purpose. Women will find you very attractive, very attractive. It's not about being the richest or the most muscly. It's about being competent, confident, independent, and detached.
How do we understand women?
Feelings.
Yeah.
Feelings over facts. It's so easy, it's so simple, but any language that you don't know is going to be complicated, because
It's interesting that when I looked in the back end of our YouTube channel and it says 95% of you that watch it frequently haven't yet hit the subscribe button. So I have a small favor to ask. If you've ever watched this channel and enjoyed the content, please, can I ask you a small favor? Please hit the subscribe button. It honestly helps this channel more than I can explain. And I promise you, if you do that, I will return the favor. We will make this show better and better. That's a promise that I'm willing to make if you press the subscribe button. Do we have a deal? Have you thought about wanting to start a podcast, but you just didn't know where to start? The thought of buying all the equipment, setting it up, recording, and then having to edit it all became all too overwhelming and probably deterred you from even wanting to start. Well, what if I told you there was a one-stop shop for all your podcasting needs? All you had to do is come in, record, and everything was taken care of for you. Well, let me introduce you to the Betar Media Podcast Studio. High quality audio, video, and lighting to allow you to get the most bang for your buck. That all sounds amazing, right? You could get your podcast up and running like tomorrow. So why don't you? So what are you waiting for? Let's take action on this thought. Let's make it a reality. Contact us today. I'm now offering a complimentary 30-minute session so you can come in and experience it for yourself. See you soon. Jaguar Heart, thank you so much for jumping on the Betar Project today.
you're welcome, man. Good to be here.
I think where I want to start is the most obvious question that people want to know. Jaguar Heart, is that your real name?
No, it wasn't my birth name. So it came through in a psychedelic journey where I was told, actually it was in my dreams first. It's a pretty funny story, actually. I was having Jaguars come into my dream and they're like, when you're ready for the message, I'll give it to you. And this was 9 years ago, I think now, 8 or 9 years ago. And I was going through a breakup and it was a real rough one for me. And I had some DMT in my wardrobe and I'd never done it before. So me coming from a world of like drugs and alcohol, I was a pretty big hitter in the cocaine world. So big amounts was what I would tend to do. And it's not a very good idea with psychedelics, but I didn't understand it. So I ended up having this huge dose of DMT at home. And I went into this tunnel. There were like these humses, with the eye in the middle of the hand. And it was like columns circulating individually. And this Jaguar came down and she was like a crystal blue color, kind of like a leopard frog. And she's like, "Are you ready for the message?" And I said, "Yeah." And she ripped out all my insides that were covered in this black tar. And then she ripped my heart out and it was dripping with like black tar. And I was like, hang on, like, don't I need that? She goes, "I'll give you another one." And this big ruby red heart floated out of her and went into my chest. And she goes, "Your real name's Jaguar and you have to take that name to become the man you're meant to become." And I was like, okay, so I came to, I'm living in Bondi at the time, right? And I'm like, what the fuck was that? I'm like, I'm going to start walking around calling myself Jaguar. People are going to think I fucking lost it. And not only that, I was like, I hate cats. I was like, I didn't like cats. So to people at the time, and we can talk about why to people and all that later, but I was just like, why couldn't I get a cool name like Wolf or Bear or something like that, or Hawk or something? So I moved to New Zealand 6 or 8 months later, and I took it over there. It just kept coming through, like, you've got to do it, you got to do it. When I did, man, just my life changed. Like, and this is, we can talk about this a little bit, the nature of physics and vibration. Words are a vibration, and the world we live in is physics. So there's resonance and magnetic resonance and electromagnetic and scalar wave frequencies and all different types of things. And when I started to take that name, my life changed very quickly from there. And so I did another psychedelic journey, and I had a Native American totem pole come out of me, and it told me that I need to take the name of the earth. And I was like, is that like stone or river or whatever? And I was at the gym one day, and I was in the sauna with a mate of mine, and he actually wasn't really made, just to be really clean on my language. He was a guy I knew there, but we'd have really good chats when we'd bump into each other. And we were in some conversation, and he said, well, if you look at the word earth, heart is an anagram for earth. So it's the same letters, but just rearranged. And I was like, that's the name. And I knew straight away. And that was, that's the story.
Well, what was that shift in you? You said, there was a big shift in energy when you took on that name. What was the shift, and what does Jaguar Heart mean to you? Yeah,
it's a good question. So it was like, I started to connect into different parts of myself. It was like the old me started to split and die, and I started to become more in line with who I was and accepting with who I was. And when I did it, I wrote out all these lists because I was trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. Because I was, the high-flying investment guy back in Sydney, flipping properties in America, making 6 figures a month, all disposable income, multi-million-dollar apartment, gold Rolexes, expensive cars, lots of women.
So on the outside, it looked like you had it all together.
Yeah. But that was a compensation for trying to fill the void within me. So it was a direct correlation. So the bigger the void, the more stuff I needed to try to fill that up. And so when I realized this, I was like, okay, I need to figure out what I'm supposed to do with my life. So I moved to New Zealand, and I woke up one day and I was like, what do I spend most of my time researching? And I looked at all the books I was reading and the podcasts and things like that. And it was like mystical experiences, shamanism, consciousness, trauma, the nature of reality. I was always very introspective and philosophical. And then I said, well, what am I naturally good at? And speaking was the natural thing that I was good at. What do people come to me for? Well, advice on business and relationships. And what am I passionate about? Was jiu-jitsu and closing deals at the time. And I looked at this and I just went, oh, I'm meant to be a therapist. And it was there that I started on the journey with that. And so the clarity that came through was this is who I felt that I was in resonance with, was this Jaguar or this name or whatever. And I don't know whether that was some sort of divine intervention or, spirit guide. It doesn't really matter. But it was the message that came through, and I felt very comfortable in that name, and I felt very comfortable to become the therapist in that. As the old part of me died, the new version was born, and that really required a new name because it required a new frequency and a new energy for me to step out into the world. And it was like, there's a good album by U2. The name of it is "The Only Baggage You Can Bring Is All That You Can't Leave Behind." Meaning like you got to drag all your shit around with you. And it was like that old name felt like an anchor. And so moving into the new name, it felt like I was free to just be this person without the judgment, or the Wolf of Wall Street guy, which was my nickname back in Sydney. And for those that are watching, you can watch the movie if you haven't seen it and let your imagination run wild with that. And so it was this rebirth. It was this new opportunity to step into where I didn't have to take that old stuff with me because I was cleaning it up under the surface, but the name allowed me, it kind of freed me in a way. So yeah, it was big.
You mentioned they're splitting away from your old identity, and you were caught up in the life of, I guess, money, sex, drugs, to fill a void.
Yeah.
What's the earliest context that myself and the listener needs to know about you to better understand the man that sits in front of us today?
That I was born out of fire, transmuted through fire.
What do you mean by that?
I grew up in a very psychologically abusive household. Both parents were fairly traumatized. I got a really good relationship with my mum now. My father died in February. And so going through this, there was a lot of dismissive, denial, a lot of like me being a caretaker for the parents and having to consider them, a lot of emotional unavailability, a lot of you'll never be good at this, like you're shit, you're this, et cetera, that sort of stuff. And so what I had to do was work through all of that as I got older, because the amount of pain I was in, I didn't want to keep spilling out onto the world. I used to be very aggressive. I spent time in prison for, you know, assaults and drugs and stealing and stuff like that. So everything that I've gotten to now has been a byproduct of what not to do. And so one of the important things that I always look at is I would never work with someone that hasn't been through it because they don't have direct experience. So lots of therapists and coaches, they talk a good game, but they haven't been through it. Whereas it's kind of like, you know, Bane in The Dark Knight. And he's like, you live in the dark. I was born in it, right? When he's fighting Batman. And that also helps Batman to become who he needs to be through the alter ego of Bane, because Bane really just represents his darkness and his unconscious that he needs to transcend through his own fears to come out into the light and fight for the city. And so it's a similar kind of journey with what I went through. I had to face all of the shit that I'd done to people, to myself, through the drugs, the sex, the self-abuse, which was a product of the environment that I went through, which you could say is hell. Hell's usually related to fire, but fire brings light, right? Fire brings heat and fire brings light. And what does it light up? What you're protecting. And so it's an illumination process as well through the transmutation of fire, which is also a very powerful rebirthing metaphor.
You could have easily played victim.
I did.
Yeah?
Yeah, fuck yeah. I did for a while. Blame my parents.
Yeah.
Blame my dad, blame my mum, blame society, blamed God. And then when I stopped doing that, that's where I was free.
Was that void you were trying to fill with the drugs, the money?
It was just trying to get away from that.
Yeah.
It was just trying to get away from that. The whole life's unfair thing. And victims don't necessarily sit there and go, woe is me. My life's so hard. You know, the world's a bad place. It's like, okay, the victim is, you made me this way, like I would to my parents. This is your fault. You need to take responsibility for it instead of going, well, it's easier, you know, like the saying, you point the finger, you got three fingers pointing back. And I didn't see that, because that means that, funnily enough, I'm responsible for all my shit. And it's really crazy and strange that wherever I have problems, I always seem to be there. So I'm the common theme in my life. And transcendence comes from owning it, admitting it, feeling the shame around the stuff that you've done, realizing you're a product of, you could say, a broken environment, but one that it can be used as an opportunity. And it's either a blessing or a curse. There's a reason there's that saying. I thought it was a curse for a long time. And when the pain became too great, I had to break free from the shackles of that identity, which was the old me. And the transmutation process starts from there.
They say the purpose is in the pain.
Oh, man. And that goes back to exactly why I said I wouldn't work with anyone that hadn't been through it.
Yeah.
Because they don't know. You know, there's intellect and intelligence. Intelligence is embodied wisdom and mind, body, spirit. Intellect is just the mind. So if you go into a counselor that's studied and they're talking about some type of, domestic violence or narcissistic abuse, but they haven't been through it. Sorry, but they don't know what the fuck they're talking about, So I'm a big believer in look at people that have done it, gone through it, transmuted it, transcended it, and living how you want to live. Then you've got someone that has a potent recipe to help you on your way legitimately, as opposed to just telling you how it should be. Because if the traditional models of therapy and psychology were that good, they wouldn't be around anymore, because they would have healed the previous generations. Instead, we've got a sicker generation than ever. And a ton of people that, are such victims. We look at the trans movement. We look at all of that shit that's going on at the moment. They're all major victim identity. Like I get people that get offended by a post and tell me to kill myself. I'm like, a post is stretching you that far that you would want someone to die. And that's a real insight into the current nature of culture that we're living in, that everyone just gets so offended. It's like I saw an Aussie comedian, he goes, so you're offended. Now what? It's okay, so what happens from here? We have to tolerate that. So we've got to tolerate you. And the ones that we have to tolerate are the ones that are claiming tolerance, but they don't tolerate you if you don't tolerate them. So they destroy their own point from that perspective, because the victim, it's like, it's my way or the highway.
Yeah, that's the whole new rabbit hole we could go down, right?
Yeah, man, we could go down there if you want.
Yeah, it's that whole, all these different movements that are happening at the moment. I believe it's just a massive distraction from what's really happening in this world.
Yeah.
Whether you see the higher powers are trying to gain control over us as a society.
Yeah.
And we can dive further down into the demasculation of men.
Yeah.
So we're more controllable. and we'll obviously dive into that. But before we do, you mentioned that your father recently passed.
Yeah.
And I've seen that you've been referring to a Jordan Peterson quote a lot of, you don't become a man until your father dies.
Yeah.
2 parts. Did you end up having a relationship with your father before he died? And then talk to me about that quote and the impact that it's had on you since your father has passed.
So my last dialogue with my father was him calling me out for everything I'd ever done. So it wasn't a good last transaction. But one of the things that I'd reconciled, I haven't actually shared this story really with any more than 2 or 3 people, but he died. And then 2 days after he died, he appeared on the edge of my bed. He was sitting there and there was light around him, and he just went, dunk like this, and touched my heart. My whole body opened up into love. And that was my last transaction with him. That was my last conversation with him. You can be superstitious. Maybe some people are, maybe some people aren't. I don't really give a fuck. That was my experience, and it was real for me. So there was a very human aspect to it. And I realized that in that, what he gave me is, I didn't write back to him because I said, I don't need this anymore. I don't need to engage you in trying to help you to understand me, because I understand myself. And so he gave me that opportunity through that. I could have reacted or I could respond. And I chose neither. I chose peace. And that was a gift he gave me, which was massive. And so his death was probably the greatest relationship that I developed with him after that, because as I went through my grieving process, it didn't really hit me for a few months. And then it opened me up. And what I would do, there's this guy named Ian Tongi. He won American Idol, and he sang a song by James Blunt called Monsters in his audition. And I saw this and I was just in tears from it, because the words are, I'm not your son, you're not my father, we're just 2 grown men saying goodbye. And the whole song is around the death of the father. And I used this song to transmute the grief. And so I'd sit down every morning for 30 to 60 minutes and write out all the good things I remembered that my dad did for me. And I realized that what I developed was a lot of resentment about what he did, as opposed to focusing on who he was, which was just being the best man that he could. You know, he went to jail when I was 5 and he defrauded the government, which actually I'm not going to say or support that publicly, but, you know, it was a long time ago. And he got offered a deal to plead guilty and he'd keep half the money, but he'd have to plead guilty. And he said no and ended up losing the money. He was found guilty because they brought in retrospective legislation, which means they backdated the legislation to make what he was doing illegal. What he was actually doing wasn't illegal, but they got him. And I used to resent him a lot for that. And then after he died, I started to see like, wow, he didn't compromise. He held up his integrity for his own name versus money. He wasn't a sellout. I'm like, oh, fuck, that's where I get it from. Because I don't sell out. I'm like, I'm not a sellout. And so it was really powerful to see that. And the amount of respect I had from him after that, which my own resentment blinded me to, just being human, it changed the game for me with that. So my relationship with him is, what is my relationship with him internally now? It's one of respect and dignity and integrity towards him. So his death healed that relationship for me. And that's what I think we have to carry through as men, is dignity and integrity, and be worthy of respect through our actions and honoring ourselves. And so when I say that you don't become a man until your father dies, which is what Jordan Peterson said, I thought I got that when I heard it, but I didn't get it until he died. You know, it's funny because I did a post on this, and this is the world of the offended Instagram and social media. People were telling me that I was wrong and their dad hadn't died yet. I'm like, motherfucker, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, come and talk to me with direct experience and I'll talk to you about it. And it's not necessarily about like your father dying, so now now I'm a man all of a sudden. There's a subconscious security that sits there, that knowing your father is there, because you're still going to be his little boy, no matter how old you are. You can be 20, 50 or 70 when he dies, but he's still your father and you're still his son. And when that goes, there's a gap that happens. And it's this, I haven't been able to figure it out yet, and I'm still sitting in it. But there's a void. There's an aspect there where he's never going to be there again for you, no matter what. There's never going to be the protector, the patriarch, the boss man, whatever it is. Because fathers will, you know, do anything to protect their sons. And when that's gone, there's an exposure. So you have to step into that role that can only be there in the absence of the father archetype that is no longer there.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I reflect now on my own life, and my father's still around. I don't have the best relationship with him, but I know if shit hits the fan, who's the first person I call?
Yeah.
It's my dad. And I know that he's always going to be there for me. Growing up, and even till recently, I had so much resent and anger towards him. And you just mentioned there, once you shift that anger and resent to empathy, to love, to gratitude, to understanding who they actually are as a person, and understanding that they're just doing the best with the tools that they have. Yeah. And I think that came to me a lot more since becoming a father myself, because we don't get handed a manual on how to be a dad, right?
Yeah.
We learn from our fathers and their fathers. My dad didn't have the best dad. He wasn't around. He had shit upbringing, has a lot of stuff that he hasn't quite dealt with himself. So he was just doing the best with what he has.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm actually super grateful for that. I've let go of that resent, that anger, and now I see that, yeah, you've been through that, but you're an amazing dad. You taught me how to work hard, how to have pride and respect for your work and who you are as a person. All these attributes that I didn't pick up on before, because we go straight to the negatives.
Yeah.
But once you shift that, I'm like, wow, you actually, I don't accept what you did and your actions, but you've taught me so much and I'm super grateful for you.
Yeah. Important point, right? Because it's like, what he actually taught you is who you don't want to be at the same time. But we just don't focus on that. And that's the gift. It's like, I work with so many people where they teach you how not to be, but we use that as resentment and blame, because the ego, which is the part of us which does that, uses two mechanisms to maintain its own existence. Because the ego's it's super fragile. It's got this grandiosity about it. It thinks we need it to survive. And on some level, yeah, we do. But it uses projection, which is, I'm going to point outward, and feelings to trick us. Feelings are not facts. And this is it's probably a good segue into the emasculation of men. We're not as empathetic as women. We're just not. But women and feminism and modern society say that we need to be these feeling creatures, and they want us to be vulnerable. It's like, you want us to be vulnerable and feeling and all that, then you want a girlfriend. You don't want a man. And so the ego is going to use the method of feeling and projection to maintain these cycles that we go through. So the resentment, the anger, the ego is going, yeah, it's your dad's fault. And then you feel angry because you made me angry. But it's like, he wasn't opening up the top of your head every day, pouring in a little jar of anger or resentment. No, that's in you. And he revealed what is already going on within you. And the world is going to keep revealing that until you actually step into resolving it, which that's where you'll start to find peace. Anger and aggression was a big thing for me. And I really only fully transcended that recently. And I was tested in the last week because, I've done martial arts for ages, done jiu-jitsu for 9 years and boxing. I wanted to be a professional fighter at one point. And I was always in the fighting with fucking people online, fighting with my ex-girlfriend, fighting with my parents, fighting with myself, fighting with fucking God, whatever. Just give me the biggest enemy possible and I'll go after it. And then recently I just started to realize that fight is gone. There's still a dog in me, but I don't need to let him out anymore. The ability to fight will always be there until I'm old. I don't need to know how to fight. I don't want to fight. I never want to hurt anyone ever again. But the peace that comes through in the absence of that, when you let go of the anger, the resentment, the victim, the bully, the tyrant, any sort of these masculine archetypes that we play out that are imbalance, then we find peace. And it was funny because I was in the cinema, seeing a movie a week or so ago, and there were 4, 15, 16-year-old boys in there, and they're being loud and pretty rowdy. And normally I'd be getting up going, shut the fuck up, like that's my fucking job to make sure that you fucking cunts don't do anything, whatever. But I sat with it. I could feel myself getting bothered by it. And I said, what if that was my son? How would I want to treat him? Would I want to be going, you shut the fuck up, or whatever? They're just being kids. And so I got up and walked out of the movie. And that was me not walking away from them. It was me walking away from the old version of myself that needed to dominate in order to feel some sort of sense of importance, which is all self-imposed and false anyway. And even as I left, I was in there, you're a fucking little bitch. You should have said something. And then I just heard that. I go, no, you know what? I didn't need to shame them. They're just kids. I was like that at one point. And I wouldn't want to talk to my son like that. So I'm not going to do that ever again. And that was the win. I was dominating the old part of me that wanted to dominate. And that felt good because I knew then that I didn't need to react that way anymore.
Would you say now that you have a healthy relationship with the emotion anger? Because I feel like, well, you can express it either externally or internally.
Yeah.
And for you, I feel like you used to express it externally.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I expressed it internally.
Yeah.
I would never want to express it outward because if I did that, in my eyes, I would see myself as my dad.
Yeah.
And I seen anger as such a bad thing, so I would internalize it.
Yeah.
How can we build a healthy relationship with anger? Because it's probably the biggest emotion that men struggle with.
So it's a good point in the what you just said. It's because if I express it externally, then I'm being my dad. But then if you're doing it internally, then you're just being your dad to yourself anyway. So you haven't gone anywhere. So anger outward is resentment. So you've done something to me or what someone's done to me. Anger directed internally is regret, beating yourself up. So it's the same thing. Like you get angry at yourself, you beat yourself up. Then you become the person that's made you angry to yourself anyway. So you haven't really gone anywhere. At least if you get it out, there's some form of release of pressure, right? So, and that's what we want to get out of it. As men, we want to be empty. We want to be still. Despite the fact that we do intense things, we don't actually want intensity. We don't like it. That's why we can't handle women when they're going off at us. We don't like it. We just like, I just want to be the mountain. I want to be still. So what we have to understand is that anger is not a bad thing. Aggression is a bad thing. Aggression is the action taken from anger. Anger is a natural emotion. We see this in the rubbish world of polarity coaching. I shouldn't say rubbish world, but it's not very good because ever notice where they say anger is toxic masculinity, but rage is sacred feminine? It's bullshit. It's like anger and rage are the same thing. Anger is just present. Rage is time accumulated anger that builds up and then explodes. If a woman expresses it, hey, it's all good. Yeah, baby, that's feminine testing. A man expresses it, you're a misogynistic, narcissistic asshole that should be in prison because you're a domestic violence abuser. So what we really have to look at is the mechanism of anger. And like I said earlier, anger is like fire. It brings heat and it brings light. And what does it light up? What we're protecting. So what are we protecting? Some type of hurt. So it's not about changing the anger. Anger is a guardian of boundaries. It can be very healthy. So conscious anger will develop protection. Conscious anger, which is I'm feeling really upset right now. I'm angry and I can feel myself being overwhelmed and I need to step out because I don't want to say something to you that I'm going to regret. That's conscious anger. That's creative and that's protective. You do that with a woman, that's going to create safety through intimacy with you too. And she's going to learn to trust you even at your highest point of emotional dysregulation. That's mastery. Unconscious anger is destructive. That's where I become reactive. I become out of control. And I become infantile. Like watch two grown men punching on in the street. You go, yeah, that's not cool. You know, sometimes it can be funny on an Instagram. You see like they're swinging for the roof and they don't know how to punch and some guy overswings and knocks himself out on the ground or something. That can be pretty funny. But if you see it in real life and you've got two sort of like middle-aged 40, 50-year-old men that they're blowing up at each other, that's juvenile. There's nothing impressive about that. There's nothing masculine about it. And so what we have to understand through conscious anger, we can address the hurt underneath it, which is I'm either scared or I'm hurt. That's really what's underneath anger. That's it. So we have to develop the relationship with anger, recontextualize it's just hate in the body. And it's actually a mechanism of protection that I'm trying to use because I'm saying stay away from me and I'm not feeling safe right now. Now, could you imagine if it was like, if the world was in a place where men could actually articulate going, you know what, I'm not feeling very good right now. I'm not feeling safe in here and I need to sort this out. And then you get to the point of mastery where, let's say you're a martial artist and you're a black belt in jiu-jitsu or whatever it is, you're going to develop a calm confidence where you don't need to fight. That's the thing that jiu-jitsu taught me. It taught me how not to fight because I got schooled by an old dude once and he fucking turned me into a pretzel. And he was just like, we weren't training in the gi, so I didn't know what belt he was and I just got my blue belt. So I was this muscled up, tattooed dude. This was like 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago. All ego. And he was just this old Irish doctor. And he was like a 4-stripe brown belt. And he just, mate, did what he wanted to me. It was like a lion playing with a cub. I was very humiliated and humbled later on by it. But once we start to address the relationship, once we develop the relationship with anger, we can start to access what's underneath, which is the hurt. And that's really what anger protects.
So ultimately it comes down to self-awareness at the end of the day.
That's a very simple statement. Simple, but just not easy.
Yeah.
Right? Because awareness is the most powerful tool we can have. But through the ego, projection, and then trusting our feelings or relying on our feelings. Like when I work with people, so there's bad decisions and incorrect decisions. Incorrect decisions are just mistakes, right? They're innocent. They don't come with emotional baggage. Bad decisions are the ones that we regret later on. Every bad fucking decision you'll ever make will be made in a position where feelings rule over your mind and it's overwhelming emotion that dictates it. You'll never make a bad decision that you regret when you're sober-minded, logical, calm, rational, and just present. You won't. There, you might make an incorrect decision, but then you'll course correct and you'll fix it the next time, or you'll keep going. Like we were talking about off camera before, how many mistakes would you have made trying to develop your podcast and the grit to go through, right? There would have been a lot of incorrect decisions, as I've made a lot.
Yeah.
But the ones that I regret are the ones I've made based on emotion.
That's a very interesting way of putting it.
Yeah.
You spoke before, and we've been speaking about emotions and society's telling us men to open up and be more vulnerable. I feel like we need to be vulnerable as men, but I feel there's a time and place, and it's not letting our emotions control us. It's us controlling our emotions.
100%.
How do you see a healthy way for men to communicate and be vulnerable?
Brothers.
Yeah.
Do it to men. Do not take your shit to your woman. Don't do it. She won't trust you. You'll also develop that muscle because she'll want that at the start. So yeah, we want men to be vulnerable and feeling and all that. I tell men, I'm like, if you've got it going on, say to your woman, babe, I'm just letting you know I've got a lot of stuff going on. I'm feeling pretty overwhelmed. I just want you to know it's got nothing to do with you, but I'm going to go and handle it. That right there is the way you communicate it with women. We don't want to sit down. I was working with a woman recently and she'd been going through a shitload, like heavy stuff, severely abusive, domestic violence, previous relationship, splitting, had a kid together. And the dude that she was with came over and was like, I need you to hold space for my feelings. And I was like, get rid of that dude because you got a girlfriend. You don't have a man that's going to hold you through this. Firstly, don't take it to your women. Secondly, take it to your brothers because your brothers will accept it and hold the space for it where you can rage, where you can be angry. You know, like you see in men's groups, like there'll be men with hands on the shoulders and the dude's screaming in rage. And then it's supported. And then it's like, cool, let's go have a roll. Let's go do an ice bath, roll in jiu-jitsu. Let's have a wrestle, whatever. That's how we do it because there's an honesty in it because we're not worried about hurting anyone because the men will handle it. That's why, and Jordan Peterson says this, conflict is less between men because there's always a threat of aggression. So we keep each other in check through that. And that happens in the expressions of emotions. So what I look to in this is fears and hurt, imperfections, blind spots. We look at this, right? This is what we dig into in our subconscious and unconscious aspects. Then what we do is we go into the awareness of it and we look at it. Then, and this is the important part, we go to people we respect and we own it because it'll bring up all the shame that's there. It's like saying that, I remember when I did my first podcast when I was in jail, she was like, do you want to talk about it? I was like, no, I can't talk about that because I was trying to appear perfect. And I didn't want people to know. Now I don't give a fuck. It's just like, whatever. Yeah, I was in prison. Cool. I was a womanizer. I did heaps of drugs. I don't care because I've owned it. But I had to go through a process of opening that tension and that shame with people I cared about and admitting it and saying, man, you know what? I lied to you. I'm sorry. This wasn't really what was going on. And universally, always with my bros, it's just like, cool, man. Thanks for sharing that. And it's never spoken about again. So it's released. So then what you do is you go into the feeling, you own it. There's a good line in Fight Club where it says, what you own ends up owning you. That's materialism. When it comes to emotion, it's what you don't own ends up owning you psychologically and emotionally. So we have to go into the part and say, I've lied, I've cheated, I've stolen, I've hurt, of whatever. That part, owning that, releases the pressure because we allow ourselves to be seen, because vulnerability is just allowing ourselves to be seen. And the minute you're okay being vulnerable, you're no longer vulnerable anymore because you've got nothing to hide. You're truly vulnerable when you're hiding something because you can be exposed. And that pushes on a deep genetic primal aspect in our DNA that if we get found out, we're going to be cast out. And if we're cast out into the wilderness, that means certain death. The difference is now there only needs to be an identity death of the part of you that thinks you're going to get turfed out anyway. Because when you get around the right people, there's an energy release that will happen, and then you don't need to keep owning that anymore. For me, my past looks like I'm watching a movie on TV. I don't think that I'm Iron Man or Spider-Man. I'm like, yeah, this might be entertaining, but I walk out of the movie and then I forget about it. And that's where it is, unless I'm in a situation like this talking about it, where I don't think about it at night anymore, worrying about being exposed, because I've owned my own stuff. And when we own our shame, shame unowned generates humiliation. Shame owned generates humility. Shame owned that generates humility, then you make humor out of it, becomes funny. Humiliation, humility, and humor all come from the root word hum, which means to ground. And when people are shaming someone, it's like, hang your head in shame. What are you looking at? The ground. It's to bring us back down to earth, to be humble. That's why in the Bible it says the meek shall inherit the earth, which are the humble, because they're the really powerful people. I went off in a lot of directions.
No, I love that. And coming back to the piece around, I guess, sharing your emotions and your feelings, especially with your partner. I was having this conversation this morning with one of my mates, and he goes, yeah, I go to my partner for, if anything's wrong, I'll go to my partner, but he does it in a way like you described. Like he'll go, okay, I'm feeling off, this has happened, but I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's having the awareness to understand something's wrong, expressing to your partner, hey, something's wrong here. So they understand where you're at.
Yeah.
But then you're going off and dealing with it. Like you're working through that with either yourself or your mates.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a really smart way, and it's a high level of emotional intelligence. And the really important thing, don't stonewall your woman. She'll know before you fucking know about it, right? They're very intuitive creatures, and that's one of their methods that they've had to develop. The weapon of the feminine is manipulation. The gift of the feminine is intuition. The weapon of the masculine is aggression. The gift of the masculine is security. That's our job, security. When it's imbalanced, then it can go a spill off into all kinds of things. But the woman, the feminine, will intuit and they'll know, right? So we need to make it very clear. And this is also leadership too. You're clear. Like women love clarity. It's like, this is where I'm going. You can come with me or not, right? So as an example, I'm in the place of monk or marriage because I'm not in a relationship. I'm talking to a woman at the moment. I'm like, this is where I'm going. This is what I want. You can follow me or see ya. I'm qualifying you. I literally said to her, I'm like, I'm qualifying you. And she's like, I love this. This is great because guys don't talk like that. But I know where I'm going, and clarity is very important. So clarity switches over or is transposed into daily life where it's like, babe, I'm feeling fucked. And I just want you to know it's got nothing to do with you. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out into nature. I'm going to go for a run. I'm going to go for a hike. I'm going to go punch the bag, whatever it is, for 30 to 60 minutes. And I promise you I'll come back to you and let you know how I'm feeling. And then if I'm ready to talk about it, I will. But I just want you to let you know that I'm okay and it's got nothing to do with you. That's leadership. That's clarity. That's being a man. That's owning it, taking care of it. Testosterone says, I'll handle it. Estrogen says, I need help. So if you're going to your woman, I need help, I need help, I need you to hold space, and blah, 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 you're turning into a woman.
Is there a way to integrate the masculine and feminine
Within
ourselves? Because as men, don't we have both energies?
I don't believe that.
You don't?
No. I think that's a construct that's been made up to make men more feminine so they're easier to control.
Okay.
Right? So I was looking at this, and I taught this in my masculinity container a couple of weeks ago. And I brought together 3 of the main men's groups out there, big groups. And I looked at the top 10 traits of healthy masculinity. Healthy masculinity, mind you. It was being nurturing, tending to your emotions, tending to others' emotions, having lots of female friends without wanting to sleep with them, having female mentors, never using control or aggression, never using words to put down women, and never discriminating against women or girls. Now, the last one is an interesting point because the fact that never discriminate against women or girls is on a list of healthy masculinity is discriminatory in its nature because it says that it's healthy masculinity, meaning the opposite is unhealthy masculinity, right? So it's discriminatory already in its basis for being on that list. Then what I did is I looked at, there was a long-term review of typical masculine and feminine traits by Harvard. This isn't me and my own research. What are the traits of, I should have brought it in actually for you because I wanted to read it, but I forgot. the traits of femininity, nurturing, relational, dependent, like all the stuff that these groups were saying is healthy masculinity are these standard feminine traits. The opposite to that is masculinity. We're meant to be anti-competitive nature is as well. We are highly competitive. We need roughhousing to actually develop our brains. We need banter. We need bullying. We need to compete. It's part of our primal aspect, which is like, if you take that out of boys, mate, it's why the world is in the way that it's in. Because I could tell you this, a few generations ago, if they tried to pull this shit on the world, the real men would have stood up and went, not on my watch. And the men in power wouldn't be in power. And so we have to be very mindful of this, because this idea that there's this, inner masculine and feminine that we have to balance. Every man I've worked with, and I haven't worked with thousands yet. I've worked with thousands of women, but it'd be close to 1,000 men. Go and transcend your boy psychology into man psychology, and then come back and tell me you want to fucking integrate your feminine. The only feminine you're going to want to integrate with is your wife. I've never seen it. It never happened to me, and I'm looking at, it's anecdotal, sure, but I've never seen a man go into man psychology from boy psychology and then think he's got to go and integrate his feminine. I think it's rubbish. And I think feminine men are the ones that try to implant that into other men to make us soft.
So in your point of view, what is health masculinity, and why is it such a problem in society where men are not actually being masculine? So I put up a question in my community chat last night. I said, how do you define masculinity? Yep. Provider, protector, yep. Morals, values, like stick to who you are, yep. Which all sound like masculine traits. Yep. Where are we going wrong?
Good question. So this rattles cages, but feminism.
Yeah.
Feminism was started in 1923 in the Frankfurt School, and it had 3 main proponents. 1 was make men the oppressor and women the oppressed. 2, destroy the family unit. And 3, install homosexuals in the church. It wasn't in the 60s that feminism started. That was all around like to split everything up, because if the family split up, then guess who gets to raise the children? The state. And what does the state want to do? Make a bunch of dependent, weak children that are indoctrinated so the state can tell them what to do to more easily control them. So feminism created, and to preface this, when men and women should have equal rights. I'm cool with that. In fact, I would actually argue that women have more rights in our modern society than men, which we were talking about before. And we can get into that a little bit later. But we look at women, they're going out working, they're going out achieving, they're going out being competitive, right? All the things that they say don't constitute healthy masculinity are supported in women going and being boss babes, strong, independent women that don't need no man, all that kind of shit. But we need each other. We're interdependent, not necessarily codependent. So what are the man's typical traits? Well, we look at it, it's like, we look at teachers, 80% of teachers are female. Mothers get custody 80 to 90% of the time. And youth therapists in the world, 85% of them are female. Sitting and talking like this and working on your problems and listening is the way females deal with their problems, because they access both sides of their brain. Men, on the other hand, if we walk and move and talk about our stuff, that's how we work things out. Because we only access the cerebellum part of the brain, which we're differently wired to women to deal with things. So sitting down with a little cup of tea and gossiping your little heart out with your woman, not going to get you anywhere. You exercise that muscle too much. It's like you go to the gym. If you do one bicep all the time, you're going to have an overly compensated strong bicep. If you're exercising your emotional muscle all the time, you're going to become needy, erratic, unstable. You're going to become chaotic. You're not going to become dependable. And when trouble comes, you're going to run the other fucking way and be a coward. And so the typical tenets of masculinity are logic, bold, analytical. We think differently to women as well. Men think vertically, women think horizontally, meaning we weight problems from 1 to however many. And I'll give a funny metaphor that I use for this, which will offend some people when they listen to it. So we can weight problems. So we go, okay, cool. I've got a podcast with Nick today. I had a session with my physio after this at 2. And I said, I don't want to be tied up or time constrained. So I solved that problem of that by moving off my session afterwards. Pretty simple. Now then I go next problem. Yeah. So we go 1, remove it, 2, remove it, 3, remove it, and we're sorted. We're very structural. This is vertical thinking. Women, for the most part, think horizontally, meaning I've got problems 1 to 5 and I can't put a weight on which one is the most important. And this is biology, by the way. I didn't write the rules. I just play the game and I figure this stuff out. It's like divergent or convergent thinking. And so this is like those old lotto machines where the balls are flying around. So the balls flying around are women trying to figure out a problem. And then the little hand that comes in and picks up the ball and takes it out, that's the masculine way of thinking that solves the problem. And so women are more emotional. We're less empathic than women. And so they've attributed that to narcissism, saying less empathy is a deliberate attack on men because we're not overly empathic, because that's not what we're meant for, because our nervous systems are 2 to 4 times more dense so we can go and hunt and kill. It's God wrote the rules. Like, I don't write DNA code. I just analyze the way that we behave. And so more emotional men or more emotional boys make us more needy, more fearful, less ability to think accurately, less ability to operate under pressure, less ability to perform, less ability to protect. And that's what we're here to do, is protect and provide. This is security, love and connection. That's safety for a woman. There's a lot of like around the safety aspect for women. So it's like, that's love and connection. That's what they need. But our first and foremost thing is to provide security. That's protect and provide. So we get that right. And then we can go into the love and connection part. Because if you just love and connection, then you're being more feminine and she won't feel safe with you anyway, because you can't provide the security for her.
Talk to me about boy psychology and men's psychology. You mentioned before.
Yep.
What is it and how do we transition into that, especially in this day and age? For example, old cultures would say, indigenous cultures that go walkabout and that have those initiation period, right? We don't have that these days. So how do we go from boy to man?
Well, doing that. You take on hard things, right? Because we have to do that. You know, we have pseudo rites of passage at the moment, like gangs, jail. That's the unhealthy aspect. The healthy aspect is the men take the boys on at 7 years old in most cultures. So the first thing is to heal the family and have a solid male role model around. And if you don't have one around your boys, find one through martial arts. Unlike martial arts is the gateway. Get them out into nature. Boys need to be out in nature, roughhousing, smashing shit, climbing trees, doing things like that. This is part of their biology to develop a healthy space. If that doesn't happen, the boy psychology stays in Tantrumville, out of control, unstable, violent, domineering is a big one. A really good, have you seen Game of Thrones?
Yeah.
Joffrey?
Yeah.
He's the perfect example of boy psychology given a man's role, right? He's small, he's feeble, he's weak, he's aggressive, he's narcissistic, he's psychopathic, because he didn't have the rite of passage to take him through in order to develop man psychology. So man psychology is going to be, usually when you transcend it, you're going to want to become a father, you're going to want to become a husband, you're going to want to serve your community, you're going to be on point, on purpose, you're going to want to be looking after yourself. You don't drown in distractions, which is boy psychology, watching porn, vaping, video games, escapism. Mummies, boys is a big one as well, part of the boy psychology. Needy, manipulative of women, objectifying women, sleeping around, things like that. That's boy psychology. Man psychology is what I said is the former, which is like, find your purpose, wanting to give more back to the world, wanting to become a husband, wanting to become a father, learning to protect our women. We don't protect our women because they're weak. We protect them because they're important. That's a really important point to know. And so you see these fatherly archetypes like Jordan Peterson, like people like that are out there. And I'm using Jordan Peterson as just an example, like Jocko Willink I really like. I like Joe Rogan, David Goggins. It's funny when I talk about male role models and I say David Goggins is a good one because he's a tough motherfucker. All the women are like, oh, he's acting out of his trauma, like he's too. I'm like, all right, well, when you know what it's like to be a man, come and tell me what it's like to be a man, because it's hard. It's fucking hard being a man. And so we have to transcend these levels through good role models that have also done that. And that's what we need to look for.
So then what's your viewpoint on Andrew Tate?
I don't like what he did with the porn stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's disgusting. And I think he should apologize for it and go, I was a creep, I was disgusting, and I capitalized off women.
They should own it.
He fucking should own it. He talks about it, But he goes, I'm not really sorry for it. I don't really apologize for it because it was who I was at the time, which there's an element of like, yeah, okay, cool. But it shows like, you know, how much society is craving strong masculine role models. And he's got the look, he's wealthy, which I think every man should aspire to make money. The first thing I tell men when they come to me, how do I be more of a man? I go, make a fucking living. Because if you can't do that one thing for yourself, you can't do it for your woman, you can't do it for your family, you can't do it for your community. Make a fucking living. That's the first thing. Then you can worry about your body and other stuff after that. Because if you're making a living, that's a commitment to yourself. So Andrew Tate, he looks the part, he's successful. He's not saying anything new. That's the thing. There's nothing in there that's new. But what I saw is at least there's a little bit of like a religious foundation, which is a connection to God, which is another part that man psychology will start to feed into, is that, which is something that I've been exploring the last year or so, rather than Great Spirit or more of the feminine new age stuff. And so I look at, who was it before Andrew Tate? It was Dan Bilzerian. And that dude's just the fucking Kardashian for men, right? Pleasure driven, like he's disgusting, right? He's on steroids and yeah, he can throw a kick or a punch or whatever. Hyper wealth, but he's more of that like wannabe hyper masculine. And he's got all these blow up doll chicks around him, which are like women around him, which it's like, he's just pleasure driven. He's fully pleasure driven. And that's Epicurean from the Roman Empire, where it's like, just follow your pleasure. And that's an empty life, man. It's an empty life. So Andrew Tate, I don't know. I'm always suspicious of people that get that famous that quickly and what role they have to serve, because you don't get there just by accident, I don't think. I don't know him, so I can't comment on him personally. There's some things he's done I find despicable, but a message that he's delivering, which is an indicator of a very sick society. You know, Krishnamurti said it the best. It's, what did he say? It's no measure of health to be profoundly well adjusted to a sick society. And he's saying the opposite to what's going on, which shows there's a real craving for men to have some sort of figure where they say it's okay to be a man. And that I agree with.
Yeah. There's a lot of controversial stuff he says, but at the core, I think he just wants men to be men and to be better men for society.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with that.
You mentioned God and you've developing a relationship with him. Are you religious? Tell me about that and the impact your version of God has had on you.
Yeah, so I was New Age for a while. You know, I was in that spiritual world, meditation and yoga, and that can serve for people. But after doing more research on it, I can see the origins of that are quite sinister. And it's quite dark. It's quite black. And so the other way, sort of the other side of the coin, is Christianity, right? So I read the Bible this year and there was a bit more comfort in it. But then I moved through that a little bit more into the idea of God, right? What is the idea of God? Do I believe there is a God? Yes, I do. Like, we could call it a creator. And so how do I prove that? Well, we live in a world where I'm able to create, but that creation is defined by rules. Rules are set by some sort of intelligent force. Otherwise, it would be chaos everywhere without rules that are available. So the rules were created for me to be able to create, which dictates preceding that there must be some sort of creator. So God is, for me, like, it's a deeply personal relationship. I don't usually talk about it in public because I find there's a lot of people that just dogmatically spew it. And I find they're the ones that probably give religion a bit of a bad name. Whereas for me, it's like I look at the lesson of the teachings of Christ, which is love God and love your neighbor. And they're the two that I really resonate with. It's pretty simple. Since I started doing that, and my father dying and ending a relationship and all that, and that weaving itself through, there's been an immense peace that's come into my heart. I just want to be the best man I can be, the best father, the best husband, the best example, you know, and move into that space. But God for me is really more a reflection of the truth of what's going on within my own self and how I want to serve the world, because it's not like I'm praying to some, you know, infinite, omnipotent being to try to get something. This is where people get funny about prayer. And they ask me what I pray about, because most people pray, I need more money or I need this. I pray for the people that have hurt me. I pray for my enemies. Not that I really have any enemies, but for lack of a better term, you know, people that have done wrong by me, I pray that they find a connection to God so they don't do it to other people. And that's where I found the magic of God come through for me, or not the magic of God, the presence of God come through. Because if I can pray for these motherfuckers, and you know who you are, if I can pray for them and wish the best for them, that's a gift from God that is presencing itself through me. And that's the way I see God. And there's people that are a lot smarter than I am. Like John Lennox is one of my favorites, and Frank Turek. Those are two apologetics proponents that they debate people. And Frank Turek talks about morality. Morality answers the question of God of right or wrong. Right or wrong produces a moral stance on the way that we've been created. Morality answers the question of God, in my opinion. Right and wrong, you make the choice. You have free will. There's going to be something that makes you feel off about it. And people say, what about evil? It's like, well, evil is present in the absence of a connection to God. Because when you have a connection of God, then evil is going to be the byproduct. It's not because of God. It's the allowance through the free will that we have that God has allowed, because it's like, do whatever you want. The most loving relationship you have, I love you regardless. Go do what you want. And so that kind of answered it for me. And John Lennox is a mathematics professor at Cambridge. So I find it really funny when people that are, not very smart trying to disprove God. And I'm like, well, these people that are much smarter than I'll ever be have produced conclusive arguments for me that satisfy my need to know. And Lukey, that you did the podcast with Luke Kennedy, we were talking one day and he was reading the Bible and I was reading a book called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And we're talking about it. I said, that book is what I need to read to satisfy my own thirst for knowledge, where I can become comfortable with, okay, yeah, cool, Christianity, God, religion and all that. There's something to it. And we were laughing about it because I need facts and evidence. I deal with facts, statistics and evidence. And so part of it is also the evidence. Like when people are atheists, it's like it actually takes more faith to be an atheist because you believe in something, or to be a skeptic. You're still holding the proponent of faith that there isn't a God. And who do you think gave you the ability to have the faith that there isn't a God? So if there isn't a God, that but means by virtue of that, there must be a God, because everything exists in opposition.
The reason I asked that question was, as of recent, I wouldn't say I found God, but I'm having that awareness that there's something out there. There's something higher. And I even bought a copy of the Bible because I want to start reading it to get a better understanding of what this world is and everything, because this all stemmed from a psychedelic experience, understanding that everything's connected. Yeah. That was the biggest thing I got out of it. I was like, holy shit, everything in this world is connected. And then all these little pieces came and I was like, there's something higher out there. Then I was speaking to people that are the Christian and people I've been saying everyone should read the Bible. Yeah. What have been some of the lessons that you have received from the Bible that you've integrated into your life now?
That a lot of that shit's happening in the world right now. Yeah. Right? Like revelations and things like that. There's something in it too. There's something in the Bible because we're looking at the world in the way that it is, like Sam Smith at the Grammys, like the inversion, if you look at like most of the demonic deities in history in different cultures, they're all the ones that have male and female characteristics, as above, so below, things like this. And I'm like, that's a hermaphrodite, right? Which is Hermes and Aphrodite mixed as one. And these were typically the demonic, evil spirits that were out there. And so it's like, okay, you've got to integrate your masculine and your feminine. Well, that just looks like Baphomet to me back in the day. So I'm like, that doesn't make sense. And so you see like Sam Smith performing like a satanic worship on stage. These people are not doing that for fun. There's something in it. And then if you understand like the symbolism that's out there, once you start to see it and all the celebrities with that over their eye and the 666 aspect and how that falls into like measurements of like the distance of the sun to the earth and the circumference and all this stuff, right? Even the Bible's got 66 books in it, and there's like, there's people that have gone and found the other lost books, like the Book of Enoch is one that's quite fascinating as well. So I think there's more than like 180 books or something that were actually part of the Bible. And there's a lot more information in that, which is quite fascinating too. And so if we look at that, like why the Bible's important is because the message in the Bible is inverted to achieve some sort of aim, which you could say is satanic. Some people like say Satan's internal and whatever, but I think that's a trick, because why would they be worshiping it on stage? You look at like Little Nas, I think it is, and he had Nike shoes with blood in it and they're demons and things like that. I mean, this is out there. This is out there. And so there's a reason that it's out there, and it's conditioning us for it to be out there. And so it's a fascinating time we're in. And I've read so many books on spirituality and, Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta and all these gurus and all of that, but I avoided the Bible, and I used to ridicule it. And when I started to read the Bible, that's where shit started to get real, where things were grabbing me in the middle of the night and things were happening in my house and stuff that I was like, well, fuck that. I don't want to know about this. But it was very real. It became very real. And so why would I read all these other books and take that as real or gospel, which is the quote, like why would I take that as gospel without reading the gospels? And when I started to, there was a piece that came into my heart from it. And so the lessons again was like, I just broke it down, which was like, I didn't break it down, sorry, Jesus did, where it was love your neighbor and love God. And when you do that in life, it's simple. I think the Bible could be wrapped up in pretty much those two commandments, because everything else flows from that.
Yeah. Do you feel like religion or the Bible, it's being demonized so people aren't going to faith and they can be more controlled by the evil parts of society?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, for sure. I think relative to that, it's like what I said, that one of the three tactics was to install homosexuals in the church. And you think about the church, and the automatic thing I think about is pedophilia. I think about like what the priests have done and all of that. That's heinous. That's evil. And so rather than go into like a man-made religious structure, I look at the teachings of the Bible and the teachings of Christ and what that gave me relative to my relationship with God. And that's just for me. I'm not trying to prove that Christianity is right. I'm not trying to prove that it's wrong. I just take what resonates and I move in that direction. And if your life becomes better as a product of that, which for most people it does, the many shouldn't be held to blame for the account of the few. It's not a very logical way to do it, but it does bring in a lot of narcissists and codependents, the rescuer and the savior, from that place. And so people that are more prone to those kinds of abuse will be lured in. It's like, where's the best place to hide the darkness? Well, it's in the light. Hide in plain sight, So there's some interesting stuff around that. I can't say that I'm a scholar or an expert at it by any stretch, but I know that as I got comfortable with the idea of having a relationship with God, my life became a lot better.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's inspired me a lot more to like go and read it for myself and get the lessons and the learnings from it.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I love at the moment, and it's, "A man without purpose will seek pleasure."
Yep.
You see the rise in porn addiction, drugs, alcohol, womanizing, all that stuff. I think this comes down to the lack of masculinity as well. There's so many men without purpose.
Yeah.
Do you feel like we solve this by not giving men, but inspiring men to step into their masculine, which will then let them gain their purpose?
Yeah.
And not be driven by like seeking pleasure?
100%. I mean, if you're seeking pleasure all the time, you're effeminate. You're in your feminine. The feminine wants to be full. They want pleasure. They want to feel everything. The masculine wants to be empty. We want space. I'm just like, as still as possible. Get all of this out of me. Like, I don't like the anxiety, the tension, the intensity and all of that. That's effeminate if we're like that. I like challenge and I like difficulty through discipline over motivation, because that is accomplishment. Testosterone goes up in your body chemically when you achieve something. When you achieve something, you're on point and on purpose. And so purpose, what it is if you can find what you love to do, you can help people and you make money from it, you're in a small percentage of people. And naturally what you're good at and what comes to you easily is another bit of a caveat there. You're going to be living a great life where it's like that will get you through hard times. The day my dad died, I showed up to a podcast the day after I did my group. I didn't move anything. I just kept showing up because that was the thing that got me through, was my purpose, because I'm here to serve and responsible and help people. And I make that my priority over everything else. That keeps me away from all the other bullshit. Like, I don't want to get on the bags and be drinking and stuff like that when I've got to show up the next day for people. What sort of man am I if I'm, doing cocaine and then I'm showing up for someone? Fuck that. I'm not going to do that. That's disgusting. That's out of integrity. I'm going to show up again and again and again. And when I don't want to show up, I'll still show up. I was up at 4 a.m. this morning. I went and did a 30-minute breathwork session in a very hot sauna with my mates, did an ice bath, and I had a splitting headache straight after it because I was dehydrated, and I had my Masculinity container straight after it. On the way here, I was like, fuck, I'm tired. I wish I could stop off and get a coffee or something. But I'm like, you made a commitment to Nick, show up. And I'm showing up. And while, yes, I'm tired, when you watch the recording, I won't appear tired, right? But I just show up and I give you my all, and I'm present with you because I made that commitment, and that's what keeps me going. And through that, we develop discipline. It's kind of like the video that was around, nobody cares about men. It's like nobody cares. And yes, people do care, but society doesn't care. But you have to care about yourself and do what you say you're going to do. Words matching actions produce outcome. Outcomes repeated produce competence. Competence breeds confidence. Confidence breeds independence, so I can make my own decisions. Independence, with those other mechanisms at play, breed detachment. So then I'm calm, cool, and collected, and then I'm confident, independent, and detached. You master those 4 aspects, women will find you very attractive. Very attractive. It's not about being the richest or the most muscly. It's about being competent, confident, independent, and detached. And those 4 elements you'll take into your purpose, and you will become very successful as well.
And it stems from, at the end of the day, taking action.
Yeah.
Just like if you want to build confidence, you can't yell in the mirror, I want to be confident, or write affirmations or whatever.
Yeah.
You build confidence by going out there and taking action and turning up, and you have all that evidence there.
Yeah.
That's why I can turn up confidently in this conversation, because I've got 4 years of evidence of episodes and conversations that I've had.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I've done this before.
Yeah.
I can just do it again.
Yeah.
And at a better level too.
Yeah.
That's how you build confidence, or any attribute that you want, is by taking action.
100%. 100%.
Let's talk about relationships. Okay. Now, the rise of porn addiction, sexless relationships. How do we combat that? Especially, for example, my instance, I've gone through stages with, I've personally been addicted to porn, and I think most men have. Long-term relationship, got a kid, and you kind of get to a point where you feel lost in who you are and who this relationship is.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for myself or any men that can relate to this situation?
Yeah. So firstly, like, no one's addicted to porn or drugs or anything. There's something under the surface which is driving it. That's the first thing, right? We say addicted to porn. What we're really addicted to is the feeling that porn gives us, right? Which might be fear, it might be desire. Like if we look at the chemical structure, fear and excitement are the same thing. Fear and excitement hit behind the belly button. That's the same place that sexual energy is derived from, right? So fear, excitement equals pleasure. Fear and excitement is desire. Desire is an arousal. Arousal is eternal, right? So when that's not transmuted into something that's healthy, it's going to go more towards pleasure, because what we're going to feel is this like hunger to go and get that. That means we're honoring our feelings, follow your feelings like society tells us to do. And then the easiest way to release that, which is what happens through watching porn, how do you feel after? You feel empty. That's what men want. We want to feel empty, and that's what that does. And so it provides that, but just through an unhealthy way. Now, what that actually does is it changes our chemical structure from watching it. We also get exposed to extreme versions of porn where it's like you need more and more extreme versions for the most part to satisfy you. That leads to erectile dysfunction because it needs a stimulant to actually start to need to get on, because the high levels of extreme stimulation that you need through watching this too much creates a chemical deficiency that only can be activated through that. So the first thing is, like, I hate to say it, but you just got to fucking man up and cut it out. But get around brothers that are solid. Get into a hard activity where you're going to be able to feel empty. The masculine's all around emptying. That's why when you ejaculate, you're empty. It's the same thing, right? It's just that most people haven't put these pieces together. So we want to release. Why? Because there's intensity. The intensity is the fear and excitement, which is desire, which is sexual energy. What do we want to do? We want to get rid of it. This is very profound information when it lands to people. You're not addicted to porn. You're addicted to emptying yourself out. That's all it is. You're addicted to feeling empty. And the mechanism that they've tricked us with is thinking that that's external. We need to go internal. Breathwork's very good. Ice baths are very good, and slowly start to taper off. Any addiction where it swings to the other side very dramatically doesn't last, right? So because it's reactive. So if we're like affirmations, which you mentioned before, affirm, the opposite is to negate. So if I'm writing I'm enough 500 times a day, I'm trying to overcome, I'm enough is the affirmation, I'm not enough is the negation. So if I'm writing I'm enough, I'm just reacting to I'm not enough. So what I'm actually doing is strengthening the fact that I'm not enough, because if I believed I was enough, I wouldn't have to write it. So everything's a reactive space, right? So affirmation is a reaction to a negation. Trying to cut something out cold turkey is a reaction to something that's been overindulgent. One is abstinence, and one is, what's the word? Is it obstinance? I can't remember. One's indulgence, and one's abstinence. So too much indulgence, you're going to go, that's it, I'm never doing this again, I'm over it, but I'll do it once more, just to, get one last thing in. That doesn't last because it's reactive, it's not creative. So we have to look at what is the underlying source that's driving it, right? What are we uncomfortable with? What can't we sit with? What is the intensity we haven't learned to sit with, that we've been taught to go and drive towards pleasure as a form of release so we can relax, because there's tension and anxiety that we haven't learned how to deal with because of our emotional dysregulation through growing up in a difficult environment. The only way we can recreate that is through these mechanisms. So it might be porn or drugs or alcohol or sex with other women or whatever. It doesn't matter. Those aren't the addiction, right? I worked with a guy just last week and he said, I'm addicted to alcohol. I'm like, no, you're not. Alcohol's not the problem. You're addicted to feeling like shit by beating yourself up afterwards. That's the part you're addicted to, because his dad beat him up and he's gay and he suppressed his sexuality for many years. So he was addicted to suppressing himself, and then the alcohol allowed that to come out. That's the emptiness that's expressing himself. Suppression and expression, right? Express is to release, suppress is to push down. So what are we pushing down that allows that mechanism to give us the release? And it's the same with all of it. So drugs will be like, they want to connect with, cocaine was my thing. So I'd always connect with people at this authentic level, starting businesses and all that shit when you're sitting around with a plate in front of you, and then you don't want to see them a few days later. It's an emptiness. It's an ability to express. It lowers the inhibitions, but in an unhealthy way through chemical dependency, because it releases dopamine and serotonin. And that's what we're hunting, and that's why phones are the next big addiction. And people will get away from that. So you're watching porn, you're addicted to a dopamine hit instead of a serotonin generation, which is healthy diet, exercise, meditation, breath work, and things like that. You've just got to replace it until you understand what it is that you're trying to escape from.
I've been thinking this time of my situation. And for me, the trigger for me to watch porn was, one, I would get rejected by the missus for having sex, and two, I'd be on the lounge and I would have something important to do, and it's like a sense of procrastination.
Yep. Which is anxiety.
Yeah, which is something I've struggled with a lot in my life. So for me, that was the two triggers for me. And I feel like in that point in my life, I was seeking pleasure.
Yeah.
I was living in pleasure instead of purpose.
Which is reward.
Yeah. And as soon as I turned my life around to like just focusing on my training and just going hard on the podcast and business and stuff like that, I haven't had the urge to want to watch porn again.
Healthy versus unhealthy. So procrastination is really important. Procrastination is an anxiety response based on the freeze function, right? So the freeze function comes from our sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and our attachment system being activated at the same time. So when we're a kid, the object of our love and affection and safety is also a dangerous place. So we don't know which way to go, so we freeze, and then we procrastinate and we don't know how to finish anything because we might get in trouble for doing something. That's all it is. It's an anxiety response. So procrastination is not the problem. It's the underlying aspect of, wow, I don't know what to do, so I freeze and I shut down. It's not actually procrastinating. It's not knowing which way to go to make you feel safe. And that produces anxiety. And so wanting a release, that tension, fear, which is anxiety, fear and anxiety are the same thing. Then that fear becomes excitement. I'll watch porn because the excitement is based on the perception. Fear is, that's unsafe. Excitement is, oh, that's anticipation. They're the same thing. They're hitting the same part of the body. It's like the same place where you need to go to the bathroom if you're scared is the same place you get butterflies in your stomach when you meet someone. It's all the same area. It just depends on the perception with which you view it. And then what do we want to do? We want to get rid of it, which is the emptying again. So it's all about emptying for men. That's why you don't really see women that are addicted to porn.
See, and then I feel guilty after.
Yep. That's you beating yourself up.
Yeah.
That's the self-punishment. So you'll actually do that. Like I was talking about the guy that was drinking to beat himself up afterwards. So I'm going to go do something, then set it up so I can punish myself later and beat myself up because I feel like I'm doing something wrong. And then you would have felt that, like if I go to my caregiver when I'm a kid, my parent is the object of my love and affection and safety, but also a threat because I might feel I'm doing something wrong. So then again, we're back at square one. You're being your dad to yourself again by beating yourself up. You're in exactly the same place. It's just used a different mechanism. So we can see porn's not the problem. It's the unreconciled emotion underneath of the way that you were treated as a kid that you're just replaying subconsciously again and again and again. And that is a relationship with yourself. And no one has a relationship with anyone until they address the relationship with their fears and concerns, which is that's what they've been in a relationship with their whole time. And in your case, my man, it'd be with a program of I've done something wrong.
You're spot on.
I know.
You're spot on. It's something deeper that I won't discuss here. But yeah, there was a quote that I seen on your Instagram and it says, looking at your partner in fear instead of love.
Looking through the eyes of fear.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
So most people are just in a relationship with their own expectations, demands, personal priorities, fears and concerns. So most people don't know how to look at their partner through the eyes of love. They're looking at them through the eyes of fear based on the victim mentality that they've got to meet some expectation or need that I think they're responsible for. So when my partner becomes responsible for the way that I feel or meeting my needs or my expectations, when they let me down, I'm going to look at that through the eyes of fear as though I can lose something and I'm either going to move away or push them away. So most people don't actually ever have a relationship with anyone else. They're just in a relationship with their own programming. So as an example, if you're in the programming of I've done something wrong, you're going to worry about doing something wrong in your relationship. And then, you know, you might go to the missus and then get rejected. And then I've done something wrong. That's the fear of rejection, right? And then I'm going to feel shit about myself. So I'm going to beat myself up. And then I haven't gone anywhere because I'm only in a relationship with the fact that I think I've done something wrong. I'm not actually in a relationship with her. And then I'm only going to confirm that again and again and again until I actually realize that it's up to me to meet my needs.
How do we break through that internal battle?
Awareness. Yeah, right. This is deep stuff. I don't normally go into this on the podcast, but I heard it there and I thought I would. So we have to see the programming. The programming itself, there's these fundamental programs that we operate from. So we have these, like, there's a vibration. Vibration creates a word. Word extends out to language. Language creates code. Code creates programs. Programming is our subconscious material. It's the inner child aspect. It's the ego, the automated software. The mind is the software. The body is the hardware. These programs, like I'm not enough, drive thoughts. Each one has a set of thoughts that goes with it. Thoughts inform feelings, right? Now, thoughts are like, when people counter me on this, people in the modern society think it's all about feelings, and it's not. Yes, you have to feel your feelings and you release it, but if you attach a thought to it, the feeling persists. If you attach no thought to it, the feeling dissolves and goes away. And I use the example, which is like, say you're heartbroken, you're not walking out, if you're not thinking about the person, you're not upset. So thoughts inform our feelings. Feelings will then drive behavior. So I've been heartbroken. I can't live without this person. You know, I don't know what I'm going to do without them. I'll never get over it. It's pretty funny. I was working with a French woman once, and I love her. She's awesome. And I said, I'm going to ask you a question. Will one day you be okay without this person? In a sexy French accent, she was like, no, Jag, I'm going to die of sadness. And I go, you are not, right? Like, it's just, that drives behavior. So thoughts inform feelings. Feelings dictate behaviors. Behaviors produce results. Results create experiences. Experiences repeat and form a pattern, right? So I look at the pattern that's going on. Most people are trying to break patterns at the behavior and the results and not realizing there's a whole chain underneath it. So these programs are what we have to sit and think. So rather than your fear of rejection, your fear of being discarded, your fear of not being important or not being wanted are all ways and mechanisms that you use to beat yourself up and feel guilty because underneath that, you think that you've done something wrong based on the way that you grew up. So you start to ask, okay, well, is it actually true right now that I'm doing something wrong? And then you say, well, no, like I love my partner and, I want to make love to her and be intimate. And maybe you approach her from a different level and instead of trying to confirm the fact that she should reject you, to replay some childhood wound to confirm the fact that you've done something wrong. So awareness of them helps you break out of it. And then you get to practice the awareness of the programming that you're stuck within. And that will be, one of the ones I was in was I'm not safe. And so one of the big things I would always look out for is a threat. And then I realized that all the threats were only self-generated in my own mind. And then somehow through physics, by virtue of that, I would collapse those into form and then they'd start to show up. So I'm the creator and manifester of my whole reality through these subconscious programs. And so when you're doing something wrong, the emotion to that is going to be judgment and guilt. So judgment will start to produce resistance. Resistance produces conflict. Conflict generates friction. Friction generates a massive amount of heat, which is then going to start to manifest as force, control, manipulation, domination, aggravation, and then eventually lead to resignation around something. And then you're going to start directing that towards yourself, which is the regret that you were talking about earlier, instead of projecting it outwards.
Wow. There's a lot in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
My mind's going all over the place right now. Coming back to women, and the common theme is women are complicated.
Yep.
You say no, you're actually just too lazy to understand them.
Yeah.
How do we understand women?
Feelings.
Yeah.
Feelings over facts. It's so easy. It's so simple. But any language that you don't know is going to be complicated, because it'll be like a woman will say, it's funny, I was working with a couple recently. I'll use this as an example because it's a good one. She was saying, he's away. He goes away a lot. He travels a lot. And when he rings her, he's not very present with her. He's just like listening and like, yeah, okay, cool, whatever. So she doesn't feel understood. And she's like, I don't like the dog walkers that we've got. He's like, all right, we'll get new dog walkers. She goes, well, I also don't like the cleaners. And he's like, what don't you like about them? Well, there's 2 of them. Okay, we'll get 3. And there was something else I can't remember. It's like, well, I don't like where I live. And he's like, okay, well, we'll move. So there's 2 different conversations going on over here. What she's saying, and then there was a long pause. And then he's like, okay, well, I'm going to bed, bye. And she was really upset about it. And I was doing a session with him privately, and I said, do you see what you did? He goes, no, I have no idea. I was just trying to fix the problem. I'm like, yeah, because the problem wasn't the problem. That was the complaint. And I rarely ever deal with the complaint. What she's actually saying is, you're not here to handle this. I miss you. I love you. And I want to know that you care about me enough, not to try to fix me, but just tell me you love me. And in that gap where the space was, what she was saying is like, I'm waiting for you to lead this conversation and say, babe, I'm sensing something's up with you. Something feels off. And I love you and I care about you and I really want to understand you more right now. So can you please tell me what's going on? And she'll say, and she would have said, because I said, what if I'd said this? She goes, I would have said, I miss you and I love you and I want you to come home and you work too much. That was her real complaint. Her complaint was love me more, but it was wrapped up in a problem that he was never going to be able to fix because it was never a problem in the first place. It was just her complaint. So focus on the feeling. I'm kind of giving away all my secrets here, but like focus on the feeling. Say, yeah. So what I'm hearing, like if she's like, you were late, you didn't call, like, I feel, like you're just super unreliable, and deal with the feeling. It's like, babe, I feel right now that you're really upset with me. And because I didn't call, because I wasn't tending to what you needed. And I feel like that hurt you. Is that right? And she'll go, yeah. And you go, can I just hold you for a minute and we don't talk? Is that all right? Can I just hold you and make you feel all right? She'll go, yeah. Go do that 100 times and I'll bet you'll be lucky to have to once or twice deal with the actual problem. The facts come later, but men will just go, I'll solve that, no worries. So what the solving does is actually subconsciously say, I don't really care about how you're feeling, I'm just going to fix it and get rid of it. And a woman doesn't want that. A woman at the deepest level wants to know her man's not going to abandon her, and through lack of understanding, she feels abandoned. Men, on the other hand, want acknowledgement for their contribution. So these are 2 different languages, right? So the woman's going, understand me, love me. And the man's going, yeah, I'm fucking fixing this shit and you're just telling me to fuck off. So the man's not getting what he wants. The woman's not getting what she wants. And then we move into the power struggle. And this is where it's 2 different languages, which is like just 2 things flying over each other. But it's up to the man to lead that. Over time, this will stop. She'll stop doing that. She'll just start trusting your leadership and the complaints will start to diminish. So for the women that are listening out there, honor your man, what he does, and respect him. I would rather be respected than loved. If my woman comes to me and says, fuck, I love the way you handle stuff, That's better than her saying, I love you so much, babe. You're wonderful. I'm like, tell me how good a job I'm doing, because I want to be the hero.
Yeah.
Men want to be heroes, and if there's nothing better than a woman making you the hero, because that makes us feel like we've got purpose and use. We're meant to have use in the world. Like a man that's stagnant dies. We need use, we need purpose, we need to build shit, we need to conquer shit. We fucking go to war for the love of a woman. But if we're not getting respect and acknowledgement, that's like a cancer to us. And if a woman's not getting love and connection, that's like a cancer to her, and that's the safety aspect.
Yeah, a man will go where he feels respected.
100%.
And we speak about understanding feelings and emotions. How do we, there's obviously the boundary line of understanding and being nice, but then going too far and being that nice guy syndrome that you talk about. First, what is that? And two, how do we not cross that fine line?
Well, the first thing is to learn how to say no and be assertive, right? So you have to have a good understanding. The nice guy has no boundaries. He's fluid. And so it's like, he's not a dependable, trustworthy person. So the nice guy's like the people pleaser or the codependent, where they're afraid to say no to a woman, right? Because they fear of getting rejected, getting like sex being taken away. So like, okay, I'll do whatever you want. I'm like, mate, she's not going to respect you if you do that. Whereas what we want to be is we want to become a good man. A good man runs on morals, which is social, which is right or wrong, values, which are independent. This defines your character. Needs, which are personal, which are your desires from a relationship. They inform your boundaries. Boundaries must have consequences. So once you're really clear on this structure, then you can start to move into being a good man. And a good man is what society needs. So I show up, I do what I say I'm going to do. I have a strong sense of right or wrong, which religion and the Bible is a good place for morality, which is right or wrong. Your values. So what are your values? So for me, it's about dignity. It's about integrity. It's about, reliability is a big one for me, and being understanding. So in these attributes, you become kind rather than nice. Nice is kind of pathetic. Being kind is a choice, where kindness and gentleness kind of go together, where it's like you want to be a danger, you want to know how to be dangerous, but not a danger. So the kind, gentle man is strong, stoic, reliable, resilient, has capacity, and then he will transcend out of the nice guy syndrome. The first way is to say no. No's a complete sentence. It's the most powerful word in the English language, but it's also the hardest to say. So you have to really know where you're going with your, like, what am I begging for here? A woman will pick up on it. It might get you like into the best friend position where you want to try and sleep with someone. Those guys are despicable. I've had guys like that try to go behind my back and sleep with my girlfriend. They're pathetic. Like those guys really need like a shake up. And if there were more strong men around, they probably wouldn't do that, because women really hold the cards in the sexual department. Men hold the cards in the relationship department. So it's about saying no. You have to understand and learn how to say no to your mates, to people, to society, to women. They might not like it, but they'll respect it, because if you don't respect yourself, why the fuck should anyone else? And someone without values, boundaries, or morals, or enforcing consequences, they don't respect themselves. They don't. And it's doing what you say you're going to do. So this is a really important aspect. How do you start that? Wake up in the morning and do something you don't want to do straight away. I sit there and I do ego eradicator, which is breath of fire with my arms above my head for 7 to 10 minutes. I don't want to fucking do that every morning. And I know I don't want to do it. That's why I do it, because it's intense and I don't like it, but I feel good afterwards. But that little bitch inside me goes, no, just go and have your coffee, man. You've done heaps of good. It's like, shut the fuck up and do it. Just do it. Because if you say no to that voice in your head, then you start to say no to other people. Whereas that voice in your head is like, if I say yes to that, then, oh, it's cool. I justify it. It's okay. I can make it fair, right? And I can make it fair that I do so much hard work, and I can have that block of chocolate. I can have the cookie. I can compromise my values for a woman. The minute you start going down that path, it's a very, very slippery slope.
Jaguar, this has been an amazing conversation. For people that want to work with you or just want to follow you on social media and see what you're all about, where's the best place to find you? Instagram's the best, pure Jaguar. If you want to get triggered, head on over there.
That's the best place. I did start a YouTube channel, but I haven't done enough content on it. Instagram's for sure the best. At the moment, I'm doing one-on-ones. I also teach my method on how to dissolve trauma in the mind. So I do private mentorships for 6 months at a time. A couple other things coming up. I'm going to be doing a relationship group container for 10 couples over 8 weeks, where I'll be teaching the fundamental deep tenets of relationships and then working with couples one-on-one. It's very dynamic. It's very fast-paced, and it's intense. But we link up the programs of person 1, programs of person 2, and the program of the relationship, and shit will just shift and change very quickly in that. So I'm doing it at the moment.
We have a closing tradition on the podcast where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest. So the question for you is, what does the world look like in your ideal world in 10 years' time, and what are you doing to make it happen?
That's a really good question. So the answer to that is restore masculinity. The restoration of healthy masculinity means the restoration of marriage and relationships. Restoration of marriage is the restoration of society. Restoration of society means we don't deal with this shit anymore. And what I'm doing is I'm teaching men that masculinity is awesome and healthy masculinity through the dissolution of trauma and the shift of perception. So then they realize the value of what it means to be married, to become fathers, the connection to God. And mate, that's where I'm headed, and that's what I'm doing at the moment to help that.
Jaguar, thank you so much, man.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate you.